The 400 Mini. It's a new Atari product. It's been reviewed and talked about by a lot of different folks already. I'd like to share my thoughts. My thoughts are going to really focus on comparing this device to the original hardware it's emulating. Let's get to it. All right, so the first thing I want to start with is how the 400 Mini compares physically to the original hardware in a couple different ways, right? Because that's part of what makes these things special, is how they compare to the original material, the original source hardware that they're replicating, right? They're as much a collector's piece as they are a games playing machine. The games playing machine absolutely is a fantastic element, but in my mind, you know, if I just wanted to play games, I could go on my PC and emulate on my PC, emulate on a Raspberry Pi. There's a lot of different methods to use. So again, what makes these things special is some of that physical nuance associated with it. So let's start first off with some of the included packaged materials specifically. I want to start with the box. You know, you look at this box here, right? So this is very similar in color to what you have from an original box. I don't have an Atari 400 box, but I do have an Atari 800 box. And they're very similar to each other. But you look at the color of the box, that silver color, right? Then from the 1970s, early 80s kind of coloring. The Atari logo on the right-hand side. While the colors aren't perfect, it replicates decently well what's done there on the Atari 800 packaging material. And you look around the various different other parts of the box, not exactly the same as what you would see on the original, right? But not far off. In my mind, that's a fantastic little touch. The next element in the box comes not just the console, but also the little manual here. Again, while not perfect, this is my original Atari 800 manual. Now, again, it's not perfect, but it's a fantastic homage. And in reality, it's nice little touches like this that makes this even more of a collector's piece. And I believe again, this is the kind of stuff that I like, and I think this is excellent. And in my mind, in my opinion, I think Play-On did a great job. They understand their audience. What do people like myself or others who would buy this? What are they looking for? All right, let's get to the hardware itself. All right, so let's take a look at the device itself. Here we have, obviously, an original 400, Atari 400, and here we have the 400 Mini. Now, visually, they look dead on. I mean, they really do. Other than the color differential, this is much more yellow. The original that I have here is much more yellowed. But if you take a look at my near mint 800 here, let's take a look at the color. And the 400 and the 800 were very similar in color originally. Let's just take a look at that color here. I mean, that's pretty dead on from a color standpoint. I think they've done a fantastic job on getting that look and feel there. All right, move that over to the side. Okay, again, let's take a look around it. If we look at, let's take a look here, this little Fuji, the silver Fuji here, Fuji symbol. It has a nice silver color, metallic color, and it is raised. You can feel that. Very similar, again, to what you see here. The silver and the raised aspect of it. Little touches, little touches, it's fantastic. The lettering, all right, the Atari 400 and the 400 here. Those are very similar. The font, they did a great job replicating that font there to make it look the same. All right, so let's take a look at the keyboard. Again, font, the look, very, very similar. Then there's some differences in a little bit of the coloring, but that could very well be like with this yellow that's kind of going orange. This yellow is a little brighter yellow, but I think that could just simply be to the yellowing of the device over time, of the original Atari hardware over time. This membrane keyboard obviously has little raised nubs so that you know where to push for the buttons. Likewise, you have that same kind of little raised feel that you have across on all the keys here. Even the little LED, power LED is in the same place as what you'd see on the original Atari 400 over here. Fantastic touches there. While not functional, this membrane keyboard is not functional. It has that feel. We can take a look now. Let's take a look on the front. On the Atari 400, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 controller jacks, right? As well as this lettering in player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, right? If we take the same look here, same thing, lettering for each of those USB ports. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but obviously, yeah, you can see the player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. Those little touches, again, what makes this different than just a Raspberry Pi inside a box is these touches that make it excellent and really elevate this to something more, to a collector's piece, really. Now, looking around the side, the ports are going to be very different, right? On the Atari 400, there are no ports in the back. There is simply just the RF cable coming out the back. You have all the major ports on the side here, power switch, jack, and SIO port, which you don't have on the 400 Mini for obvious reasons, right? Those are not there for that specific reason. Additionally, I know that this is something that's been mentioned by a few other YouTubers in particular, is the door is non-functional here. We have that cartridge slot there. It would have been super cool to have that open. And this is really, and again, if anyone from PlayOn is watching this video, this is a revenue opportunity for you. If this had been fully functional and you had a cartridge slot that was a USB port, you could sell a cartridge-shaped, Atari 8-bit cartridge-shaped SD card, or thumb drive rather. I would have bought that in a heartbeat. That would have been just the end-all be-all awesomeness there, right? So as you look to add additional games on, I just plug a USB thumb drive into the back here. It would be it's just kind of cool to have it in there and have it actually as a cartridge that would go in there. So just my 2 cents there. On to the joysticks here. Okay, this is, on the left is my CX40. This is the one that came with the 400 Mini. Other than the fact that my original CX40, which I think is in excellent shape and has been well cared for, it's 40 plus years old, right? And there's a little bit of wear and tear on it. And so you can kind of see that difference a little bit in the material, light reflection. This is a little dimmer. This is, in my mind, just looks newer, to be frank. And obviously you have the functionality of the different buttons here in the ring. Again, in my case, the rubber on the control stick feels very similar. Difference is, obviously there's an extra button here. You also have these other menu and start buttons up there. Select menu buttons there. And then lastly, the feel of the joystick. I'm gonna say, and it could simply be that this is newer, right? The mechanics I've seen on the inside are different, but This is a bit of a looser joystick feel. And again, it could simply be, I'm not comparing new to new, but this feels like it requires a little more distance to activate. This, on the other hand, it's a very small movement window. I've never been a fan of these joysticks, the original CX40, and moved away from them as soon as I could on any of my computers to something else. And as such, I'm not the biggest fan of this one either. What am I the fan of? I'm the fan of, in the case of original Atari hardware, something different, like a quick shot. This is the kind of thing I'd like to use with my other computers. But when it comes to a C60 or CX40 homage joystick, I actually really like this one that came with the Atari VCS. And as such, I prefer this. I like the look and feel. It pays homage to this, but doesn't try to simply replicate it, right? This feels like this is attempting to be a complete replicate, and that's fine. I'm not gonna that's what it's there to do, right? But in my case, I prefer this to actually use and actually play games with. The other thing, again, with this, the newer joystick here, with the 400 mini, one of the things I find is I hold the joystick like this or like this, and I find when I'm playing games, I'm either bumping this button here because I'm holding it like this, and so I bump that button and activate something else, or bump these ring buttons occasionally because I'm holding it like this. This is how I would hold it as a kid. And so I find myself bumping various different buttons as I'm trying to play games with this. So just again, my 2 cents on that. The fact is because of how this is set up, you can use all sorts of controllers. I prefer this guy. Lastly, on the design form factor side of this, the 400 mini, I asked myself the question a number of times as they were looking to release it and announce it and whatnot, and I was wondering, why the 400? Why the 400 rather than the 800 or the 800 XL? This is in my mind, and obviously I'm coming from a very specific perspective. I look at the 800, that's the granddaddy. That is the one that started it all. The 400 was the lower end model, and like, yeah, you can pick it up if you feel like it. But really, if you want the real thing, you go for the 800. Or a few years later on, the 800 XL, and I could be wrong on this, but I seem to think that was probably, at least from what I find available here in the US, this seems to be one of the most common ones that's available. Now, again, I could be wrong. It could actually be the 400 is the most common one available. But I started thinking a little more about this and kind of digging into and looking at it. You know, which one is the most distinctive and screams Atari the most? And I would say, in spite of the membrane keyboard, this kind of shouts out, I'm different, right? This colorful membrane keyboard, it gives it a little bit of a more distinctive appearance. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion on it, and that's why I think actually I'm actually okay with the 400 being the physical form factor that was selected. Again, I started out thinking, why that one? As I thought through it some more, it makes a bit of sense. All right. You know, looking at this, what kind of original hardware would you need in order to replicate the capability here, right? I love original hardware. I think it's fantastic, right? So the Atari 400 or the 400 mini, it's around 120 US dollars, right? And one of the first things you could say is like, hey, I've seen on eBay maybe Atari 800 XLs, Atari 600 XLs, maybe an Atari 400. I've seen that for like 75 bucks or 80 bucks, right? Or whatever the price is, something in the realm of this. That doesn't get you all the way there, right? Before you can actually utilize, let's just say, the Atari 4 or the 400 mini, it replicates or emulates up to a 130XE. So the 128 megabytes of RAM that you would see in this. A and an Atari 400 original hardware has 16, right? Now there are upgrades available, but many folks where the products that you're buying on eBay or from random folks around town on Facebook Marketplace, they're not going to have the upgrades installed in them, right? So you're not going to have that capability. So what would you need in order to get that functionality? First off, right, you need something to read media. You need a floppy drive with floppy disks, right? You need that at least. Or you can get S Drive Max or a FujiNet. If you get a floppy drive, you got to make sure you have an SIO cable, right? So that you can't connect it to your computer without an SIO cable. And these themselves are sometimes hard to come by if you didn't get one with your floppy drive. Cartridges. These are good. These are good for games in particular and some early software on the 8-bits as well. So you can get something there. But you'll also need some sort of a power connector. Whether it's a modern or vintage, you probably want to stay away from the vintage on the later 8-bit lines. This is simply a USB wall wart to Atari XE or XL style connector, power connector. The 400s, the 800s, and the 1200 XLs have a different power connector, but you'd have to get that. You'd also have to get some video connector. You'd probably want something from using the monitor port out in order to get the best signal. You can do RF if you really want to, radio frequency, but you're not going to get a very good image from that. But you need all of that kind of cabling connection in order to get this thing working, right? To get the original hardware working. So the value story, in my mind, of this is plug and play. This is easy. You just plug into an HDMI port, USB-C port, USB-A, and you probably have a lot of the cords. Well, actually, it even comes with a power cord, an HDMI cord as well in the box for this guy. So you already have that readily available. You have the cords that you need. You have the capabilities to get up and running very quickly. The other part about this, right, if you bought anything used off of Facebook Marketplace, eBay, whatever, Craigslist, they're not guaranteed to work. Some will work, and they're sold as tested working. And they were working, and are working, at least initially. But this is 40-year-plus old hardware. You're going to need to be able to maintain it potentially. This guy here, well, it may break in a few years. It'll just work right off the bat. And if it doesn't work, you return it and get a new one, right? If you want that. So I'm just kind of going down the path of all the pluses and minuses, and there's a lot of pluses to this, to getting this to work. I'm just going to do a quick add up of all the different costs that you would need in order to get an original computer working. Original computer, you're probably looking around, let's just say it's the same price as the 400 mini, $120 US. You'll need a power cord, another $15. Video output cord, another $15. Let's just say you go for a FujiNet. FujiNet's awesome, $75. Video output, I already got video output. They're video improvement, right? So that you can actually get a better signal out, depending upon which ones you get. If you have a 400, if you don't want just RF and you want a monitor port out or composite out, you actually have to upgrade it, add an upgrade to it. You may need a RAM upgrade if you're not getting a 130XE in order to get the same functionality that you have here. That's another maybe $30 as well. All in, you're talking about $300+ to get one of these guys hopefully working with all the hardware you need to get set up and going. Whereas the 400 mini, you're talking 120. It's emulation, but it just works. And that's part of the attractiveness of it. So I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but to just start running and playing games like Mule here, the 400 mini is pretty close to plug and play, especially for the included games. I mean, it is. It's purely plug and play. The image is great. You plug it into your HDMI, run it on your monitor, run it on your computer, you're good to go. Adding other video games to it, it's not that hard. It's actually very similar to what you would see adding to something like a a FujiNet or S-Drive Max, taking those images, the ATR images, the XEX images, the CAS images, and actually just plugging and playing and getting it started. You can even swap multiple disc games as well. So what's my verdict? Who is this for? And really, the verdict is, it depends. It depends on who you are, depends on what you want to do. And really, the question that I look at is who is this device for? Number one, first and foremost, I look at it as something that's for people like myself. I'm a collector of everything Atari. I love Atari. I like collecting these things as much as anything else. And that's why I love the box and the manual. The attention to detail on that. The attention to detail on the actual physical form factor of the actual The400 Mini, right? Those kinds of things really matter to me. But who else could this also be for? I seem to think that this is something that would be for where I was 10 years ago. So a little story 10 or so years ago, 2014, 15, whatever it was, right? I had just gotten a Raspberry Pi 2 because I thought that was super cool. And one of the first things that I installed on it, after playing around with the desktop environment and just goofing around with it in general, was RetroPie. As I was playing around with RetroPie, first I said, oh, I can play some Nintendo games and whatnot, console games, right? And I came across the Atari ST specifically in that case. And that got me going down that path to the point of my Raspberry Pi 2. I took a 3D model of an Atari ST, modified it so that I could fit my original Raspberry Pi 2 inside of it. It's not exactly the best design, it is what it is, but I actually run this today as an emulated Atari ST specifically. My own version of an Atari ST Mini, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? And I look at this was my gateway drug into the addiction of vintage computer collecting. This got me started. I look at this kind of device could be something that will get other folks excited into this hobby, and it's a fun thing to do. The nostalgia factor of it. But at the end of the day, it's a great plug and play system. You plug it in, you play some Atari games, you can do some really cool stuff with it. You can, if you have nostalgia for those Atari 8-bit games, Atari 8-bit software, even Atari 8-bit Basic, this might be something that may be for you. All right, I appreciate for watching. Thanks for watching this video and sticking through to the end. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.